Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again. So happy to be back. Today, as I alluded to a little bit in my last video, today I want to talk about some of the books that I was assigned to read and that I really enjoyed reading for my classes. Since I've gone back to school, I was going to just focus on the readings that I had to do for this last spring semester of classes. However, that would have meant leaving out a lot of really wonderful comics, especially from the fall semester. So I figured, especially since I haven't really talked about anything I've been reading since last summer, this would be a good way to catch you all up on some of the favorites that stood out from what I was actually assigned to read. Before I get to the list, if you could please like, subscribe, share, hit the bell icon, all that stuff goes a really long way in helping the channel grow. Thank you so much for everyone who's been watching. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, I mostly talk about fantasy, epic fantasy, and sci-fi, but as you'll see in today's list, that's not the limit of what I enjoy, especially when I'm taking some of these more kind of intense theory classes that force me outside of my comfort zone. Okay, so here's the list, and I guess before we get to entry number 10, I should also say these are 10, like my 10 favorites, and they are kind of ranked in what would I go back to, am I most excited to talk about. They are kind of ranked in that order, 10 being maybe the least interesting or the least excited, but I really do love all of these, and I feel really lucky to have gotten into classes that and then to have had kind of the discussion community and just the wonderful classmates and professors to help kind of guide us through discussions around a lot of these books. So I feel fortunate to have been able to read all of these. There's just some that I prefer more than others. And of course, these are not the only 10 things I read this last year. They're just kind of the top of the stack, the favorites. But yeah, before we get to entry number 10, I have one honorable mention, and this is more an honorable mention because it's something I've read multiple times previously. I don't think I've ever talked about it on my channel, but I absolutely love this book, and it was assigned for my comics class back in the fall, and that is Art Spiegelman's Mouse, A Survivor's Tale, volumes 1 and 2. If you haven't read Mouse and you don't know much about this book, I can't recommend it enough. It is possibly my favorite book out there. You know, if I had to pick one work that I think's the most important that I've read, or the book that makes me maybe think the most. I guess I should explain a little bit what it's about if you're unfamiliar. So as you can see on the front there, this is a Holocaust narrative, a Holocaust nonfiction oral history sort of, but presented in comic book format. Art Spiegelman, his father Vladek, was a Holocaust survivor, and in the book, Art changes his name to Artie, so the book, or the comic book version of the author, is slightly removed from the author and artist himself. But yeah, so what Spiegelman did here is he made all of the different characters based on their ethnicity and or nationality. He gave them different animal heads. So all of the Jewish characters have mouse heads. All of the German characters have cat heads and faces. All of the Polish are depicted as pigs. The French, I believe, are frogs, but there's not that many French characters in the book. So already that's a pretty kind of provocative way to draw the Holocaust when we talk about how important dehumanizing is for the goals of those committing genocide. Kind of an interesting artistic experiment or artistic place to start telling the story from. But really what's so wonderful about Mouse, and why even though it's not in my top 10 because it wasn't something new that I read, why I still really, really want to talk about it, I want to make sure it's on your radars, is it's not just the oral history reproduced in comic format of Vladek Spiegelman's Holocaust survival story. So much of these two volumes is the actual the story of the oral history process itself, and of Artie interviewing his dad, him going to his house, helping him organize his pills, getting frustrated that he maybe should be wearing a nicer coat, or his dad thinks he should be wearing a nicer coat, getting frustrated that his dad calls him at 6 a.m. in the morning, things like that. So yeah, so much of it is the Holocaust survival story. A lot of it, though, is these interview sessions and just kind of the relationship that he has with his dad in New York in the late 60s, early 70s. And most of this was published in the 1980s. Volume 2, I believe, maybe had been released or was released early 90s. All of this based on or kind of building off of a shorter comic that Spiegelman did with the same kind of style, but slightly different version of the mouse heads, slightly different details in the early 70s. But yeah, I can't recommend this enough. If you haven't read Mouse, please give it a try. Obviously, pretty intense subject matter, but just the way that he tells the story and grapples with the nature and the kind of difficulty of telling a story like this, generational trauma, really, really excellent stuff. So yeah, shout out to Spiegelman's Mouse. Okay, so now into the list proper. The first thing on my list comes from a theorizing infrastructures class, and this week in particular we were talking about petrofiction, in other words, fiction that has a lot to do with oil and kind of the modern world's obsession and kind of over-dependence on oil. And this book that we read for this week, we talked about those ideas a lot throughout many weeks of the class, but for 1 week we read Helena Maria Viramontes' Under the Feet of Jesus. Really, really kind of short book, but really, really great stuff. Nothing fantasy or sci-fi in here. There will be more of that further down my list, but this is really just the story of a family of immigrant laborers in Southern California, and they're just trying to survive, working jobs in various fields around there, just moving place to place. A lot of really great discussions and imagery with the characters talking about the tar pits and being stuck in any one place in time. Also, there's this idea that one of the characters, she really kind of hates the idea of gasoline or needing to get gas to put in their truck, because that means that then they have to get up and move yet again. And she's a teenager, and she's just been moving like this from different farm to farm to farm, and she associates gas or gasoline with that instability in their lives. Really, really beautiful, kind of powerful story. If any of that sounds interesting to you, I recommend Under the Feet of Jesus. Yeah. So that's 10. Then 9, we're going to the first comic that's on the list proper. First comic that I read for the first time that's on the list. And this is Alison Bechdel's Fun Home Family Tragic Comic. So this is... I'll show you a little bit of the art style of these, actually. Maybe I should have done that with mouse. Oh well. But yeah, this is kind of the art style, and it's actually a nice page to turn to. This character here is her father. That's her. It's it's pretty autobiographical, and it's kind of all about her life growing up with this sort of shadow of her intimidating father, who maybe wasn't the most faithful to his wife. How much did Bechdel's mom know about this? And kind of a lot of that complicated family tension runs throughout this whole book. Also, there's a tragedy early on. It might say what that tragedy is. I guess I'll just say that she's writing this kind of from the perspective after her father's died. And so reflecting on her life growing up in this house, and growing up in this family, and her kind of tense relationship with her dad in the wake of his death, what she makes of his death, and kind of the peculiar circumstances of his demise. This all kind of runs throughout the whole book. Really, really interesting book. If you're kind of a literary fiction fan, this will definitely be for you, because there's so many references to like the greats and the classics and stuff. Because her dad's a professor, and he gets her reading a lot of like really heavy, like he has her reading Ulysses when she's pretty young. And yeah, he just like gets her into all of these classic authors and writers. So a ton of references to stuff like that. There's also LGBTQ plus content in here. Yeah, I recommend this if that sounds interesting to you. It's 9th on my list of best books I've read since going back to school. Next up, 8th, and this is another comic, but it would be more appropriate to say it's a manga, and this is a collection of short stories. Kind of cheating here. A lot of the stories, though, are pretty thematically linked, and this is a collection of Moto Hagio's short stories, or some of her short comics, and the collection is Drunken Dream and other stories. Drunken Dream is just one story in the middle. That story was fine. It's probably the most kind of explicitly science fiction one set in space. A lot of the stories in here, or a lot of the kind of short mangas in here, have a lot to do with grief. There's often like a dying parent or something, or someone sick in the hospital. That runs throughout a lot of these. Two of the stories that I really, really like. Let's see if I can find them real quickly. Don't know if I can. Okay, yeah. So, what's the name of this one? So, this story, Henshin, Half God. This is about twins and how one is healthy and one is sickly, and how one sort of like took the beauty from the other, while the other may have taken the smarts from the other, and kind of like keeping this really tragic sort of balance between the two. Really, really kind of haunting stuff, but a really powerful story. So yeah, that one really stands out. And then there's this other one that's one of my absolute favorites, Iguana Girl. And I know, as silly as that kind of like cover art looks, trust me, it's a really powerful story. And this one's all about a mother's tense relationship with her daughter, and her daughter not necessarily being the type of daughter that her mother wanted or hoped she would grow up to be. You can see some of the art there for that story. But yeah, and I guess just a little bit of history. Moto Hagio, who wrote this, she and a couple other artists and writers, they kind of pioneered the shoujo, or like girls manga movement, back in the middle of the 20th century. And so that's what a lot of these stories come from, even though from my understanding, that subgenre of manga, a lot of those stories are about like romance, like teen romance in school and stuff like that. There's some of that in here, but it really does deal with like extremely heavy themes, as I hope my brief descriptions of some of these stories kind of help to highlight. So yeah, if you like manga and if you want something that deals with maybe more grief, some short stories collection, and if you're kind of interested maybe in the history of certain subgenres of manga, I recommend Moto Hagio's Drunken Dream and Other Stories. So that was, what was that, 8th place? Okay. So now in 7th place, we get into probably readings from my favorite class that I took this last year. This was a Latinx speculative fiction class, and the first one I want to talk about there, 7th place, again though, I do really still love this book, even though it's not, top 5. But this is Silvia Moreno Garcia's Gods of Jade and Shadow. Moreno Garcia was actually at, or the guest of honor at ICFA this past ICFA, so it was wonderful to get to meet her and see her speak more about her process and just the genres that she's writing within. But yeah, this was one of 2 of her books that we read for that class, and this is basically it's kind of like a road trip quest novel across 1920s Mexico, with a young woman and a slight spoilers, but nothing that you don't find out in the first 30-40 pages, young woman and a god. And this pair, they kind of have to go on this quest looking for pieces of this god, kind of to put him back together, sort of, and so that he can challenge then his brother, who has taken over the underworld, or control of the underworld from him. And so you kind of have like, okay, so we're going to hit this city, then this city, then this city. First we're looking for this part of him, then this part. So the pacing's pretty excellent. That road trip kind of quest narrative keeps things pretty interesting. The protagonist, Cassiopeia Tun, her cousin is a bit of an ass, and he's pretty unlikable, especially when you first read some chapters, or especially when you first read some of the chapters that are focused on him and what he's up to throughout the story, kind of following them. But I think I think Garcia is exploring something really interesting with him, about sort of like his inherited misogyny a little bit, and how this quest, seeing the real world, might be changing his perspective on things. Maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. But yeah, I found those chapters at first annoying, but then pretty compelling. But yeah, also just the kind of chemistry, not necessarily romantic. Maybe it gets a little romantic, but not so much a fan of that part of it. But just the kind of friendship, chemistry between the god character and Cassiopeia, the main character, I found really, really interesting. Also, what's excellent about this book is that it relies on numerous pretty explicit references to Mesoamerican mythology and cosmology, and if anyone is familiar with the Popol Vuh, that is almost mandatory reading to understand a lot of the references that are made throughout this. The Popol Vuh is this sort of mythological text, mythological slash religious text of Mesoamerican, like kind of southern Mexican, Guatemalan, Yucatan area, lore and history. So if any of that sounds interesting, I highly recommend Gods of Jade and Shadow. Also, I know she has, Moreno Garcia has a lot of other, maybe even more popular books, like Mexican Gothic. I know Silver Nitrate's pretty popular right now. If you've read those and you like her writing style, no reason not to give this one a try. Really, really fun, really great book, Gods of Jade and Shadow. Next up, in 6th place, is a weird one. But yeah, I'll try to bring it up. This is from the comics class, and this is called Building Stories. It is a comic, but really, you can kind of see it looks like a game box almost. It's one of the most creative, inventive things I've ever seen, or read in my entire life. Basically, the back kind of gives you a bit of a diagram, a bit of help looking at all the different types of, formats that this story takes shape in. There's, pamphlets, there's kind of a newspaper format, there's, a brochure, there's a game board, tells part of the story, but really what happens is you open this up. Sorry, I'm trying not to make a mess. You open this up and you have like here's just this little one part piece of the story in this format, and so you just read through that, see what you can make of it, what you understand about this stage of this woman's life, of our protagonist. Once you read a few of these things, you start to get the sense that, okay, so this is a story about a woman who is missing one of her legs below the knee, and so she's been living with this disability for most of her life. And but then, like, with each different piece of the story or format of the story that you pick up, there's like the newspaper one, there's a couple like that. With each different piece of the story that you pick up, you start to fill in gaps of the different pieces of her life. And like in one, you might say, okay, well, what happened to that other boyfriend? Didn't she used to live in a different apartment? Then you pick up a few of these different random pieces later, and you're like, oh, now I see how we got from A to B, or A to Z, I guess. But yeah, let me see if I can find some of the really cool things. Some of it's more just like traditional comics as well. A lot of it centers around this time period in her life where she was living on the third floor of kind of a small apartment complex with two neighbors. And so some of the stories, you kind of get these side stories of what those neighbors' lives are like or what they're up to. There's this really bizarre inclusion, and I love that it's in here. There's a couple references to and stories about this bee. I believe his name's Branford Bee, and it's just comics about, Branford the bumblebee, and it's just comics about what this bee is up to. You find out he's a bee that's kind of around in the garden near that apartment building, but yeah, if this is one of the first things that you pick up out of the box, it'll be totally jarring and like, what the heck am I even doing here? But yeah, just the way this is all laid out, it's incredible. And the author, I believe, is Chris Ware. Wrote this. Sorry, I have that upside down. On the back, I might have been showing you the back upside down before. I don't know if I was, but if I was, then there's that. So you can see kind of the different formats. Kind of a layout of, or blueprint of her apartment at one point in time. Or maybe that's part of her house. Not sure. Really, really great stuff. A lot about disability, being a mother comes into it eventually, and yeah, just a really, really cool way to experience a story, building stories. If you want to get, I think you can find some used versions of this on eBay for not all that expensive, but if you want a new one, it is a little pricey, but it is really worth it. Like, it's a ton of fun. Especially if you like, just when you read something, if you're drawn to kind of the form and the style of it, more so necessarily than the specific details of the narrative, I highly recommend building stories. So that's sixth place, and that's probably the most unconventional thing on this list. Okay, so next we have another book from the Latinx speculative class, and this is Sabrina Varvulius's Ink. And already from the cover, you can probably tell this has something to do with maybe genocide, that would be exactly right. The barcoding, tattoos, obviously reminiscent of the tattoos we know from the Holocaust, but these barcodes in this story are applied to immigrants into the United States of America, and there's different colors for if you're an immigrant but now you're a citizen, or if you're an immigrant here on a labor visa, or if maybe you have birthright citizenship, then you would have a different barcode as well. Really, beginning of this book, deportation policies really kick up. Obviously, a very timely book. Really difficult to read right now in our current political climate. The current sort of horrible, inhumane way that immigrants and just international people are being treated in this country. really important book. Tackles a lot of the themes. Like if you want to read some fiction that is frighteningly similar to what's going on right now, some like dystopian fiction that is not so much dystopian or not so much fiction, I highly recommend this. But it will be a difficult read, I think, especially right now. Basically, this book has 4 point of view characters. One is a journalist, one is a woman who works for like the kind of bureaucracy end of barcoding people and stuff, but she herself is a first generation immigrant descendant or descendant and survivor of the Guatemalan genocide. So you have those 2 characters, and they kind of hook up there in a relationship. Then you have this guy named Dell. He lives on a farm. Most of this takes place in New York, like not New York City necessarily. Some of it's there, but some of it's kind of more like upstate New York. And yeah, so Dell, he and his family, they have a bit of land. His storyline is a little difficult to talk about without getting too much into the weeds and spoilers of the book. And then there's this other character. She's the daughter of this woman who works at this. It's like a medical facility, and they say that they're taking immigrants there to make sure that they're healthy, but that just all really feeds into all the genocide narrative of how unhealthy and dangerous immigrants are, and it really just gives authorities more of an excuse to arrest whoever they want, and to send to at least these facilities, kind of first remove them to those places before they can deport them to wherever. Yeah, this daughter of the woman who works there, she kind of gets involved in some of these subtler resistance movements, trying to stop the current administration from all of these horrendous genocidal deportation practices or policies. Yeah, really good book. Really difficult time to read it, though. Inc. Sabrina Vervolius. Okay, so then in 4th place, I want to talk about the second and final book from the infrastructures class. This is more a novella. This is A Psalm for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. This falls into the solar punk genre, and this is a different planet, or it's the moon of a planet, so definitely sci-fi, but definitely solar punk. A lot of kind of optimistic look at renewable energy in a sci-fi setting. Then our protagonist here is this tea monk who goes around to villages and serves tea and just listens to people, talks to them, sort of like therapy, but more just kind of like a social bonding therapeutic experience that the protagonist offers. The tea monk, they kind of go off into the wilderness, and they go because they want to hear the sound of crickets. They've heard of this, and they want to go somewhere where they can hear this. But apparently, in their studies, they found that this cricket sound, one of the best places that they might be able to hear it is past a certain border line where a lot of the robots, a lot of the kind of more sentient artificial intelligence machines that were created decades ago, where those machines were sent to kind of live in their own peace and to leave behind the humans who were on the other side of the line, because only in doing that kind of split could the humans progress in a more peaceful way, I guess was the thinking. Anyway, the tea monk is going out to find the crickets in this kind of unknown wilderness zone, and they come across a robot. Mosscap is the robot's name, and it's just this really kind of beautiful, charming friendship discussion about sentience and consciousness and just life, and it deals a lot with fear of death, a lot with just taking moments to just marvel at being sentient, at being alive and witnessing the wondrous, miraculous things around us every day that we might take for granted. It's really short, but it really packs a very emotional punch, but a very optimistic emotional punch, which is definitely much needed. especially compared to a lot of the other readings or a lot of the other books that I'm talking about on this list. But yeah, I really short read. Highly recommend Psalm for the Wild Built. And next up in third place, we have E.G. Conde's Sordidez, another novella-length work, and this is pretty recent. This was also for the Latinx speculative class that I read this one. And this was one of, if not, I think this was the last thing we read in there. And I had already kind of started writing my term paper, but I had to rework certain pieces of it because this book just really blew me away. I was just so fascinated by what Conde was exploring here. You kind of have two stories woven throughout this short kind of 140 pages or so. You have this not too distant future where the U.S. has basically pulled out of supporting Caribbean islands, specifically Puerto Rico, but supporting Caribbean islands, Central American countries, and Mexico and stuff. U.S. has pretty much stopped helping and providing aid after natural disasters to these regions. China comes in and sort of fills that role for a little while, but then this kind of more global, kind of scarily global authority power called it's like the United Nations Parliament or something like that. Yeah, I think that's what it is. The United Nations Parliament comes in to make everything better or solve things for everyone. But Conde, has leaves nothing to suggest that they're actually going to fix things or solve any issues of equity or suffering in this region of the world that's been so ravaged by these storms, but also ravaged by genocide and dictators and these really violent regimes, because the other kind of half of the story is, and this is hard to talk about without spoiling things. It's so good, I don't want to spoil anything, I don't want to give anything away, but basically you have some survivors of some of that genocide grappling with how to carry on in kind of a newfound family community. You have one character struggling with his memories and trying to figure out what happened to him and his family at the hands of the genocidal dictators. And then you have some others coming in seemingly to help with support this community, to document and do journalistic reports about how people can survive in this way. There's also some stuff about getting memory back. There's a lot in here about forgiveness, a lot in here about what it would be like to be in the mind of a genocidal dictator, which can be very uncomfortable. But yeah, just the way that these two stories kind of weave together, I thought it was really beautiful. The part that I like the most is the part that I can say the least about without giving things away. But if any of that sounds interesting, this kind of near future, post-genocide, post really devastating genocide, post really devastating environmental storms and conditions. If that setting sounds interesting, and if grappling with the ideas of genocidal people sounds interesting to you, and ideas of forgiveness, can people change, this sort of thing, I highly recommend Sordidez. Again, that's E.G. Conde. And that's my third favorite thing I've read all this last year in school. The next two, one is from the comics class, or the top two. One is from the comics class, and one is from my favorite thing that I read from the Latinx spec fiction class. Yeah. Okay, so first we have the comic. And this, just based on the title and the little I knew about it going in, I don't know that I expected it to be one of my favorites, but it really, really is incredible. This is The Art of Charlie Chan, Hock Chye. by Sunny Liu. So this book's a little difficult to describe, but basically this tells the story of a fictional comics artist, Chye, a fictional Singaporean comics artist who started working on comics when he was young, and then he just kept developing his style, mimicking different styles from around the world, similar to those time periods. And it kind of starts, I think, in like the 1950s or so. And Charlie Chan Hock-Chye's journey writing, Charlie Chan Hock-Chye's journey working with comics and his changing styles kind of develop along the same timeline and at the same time as a lot of this political tension was going on with the Singapore government and whether or not they should be part of Malaysia, the relationship between, like the political relationship between that part of the world and China. There's a lot about language and losing culture through loss of language. There's a lot about that in here. But it's really, really just cool how Sunny Liu invents this fictional artist to tell the biography of and uses all of these different comic styles that he's basing on, that he's basing on different artists from those different time periods, and it's very educational in the history that he's tackling. Here's some more different styles. Really educational. Plays around a lot with different form and style, it just kind of blew my mind. Here's some like portraits and stuff. And there's references throughout and like footnotes in the back saying which different artists and styles any of these different sections of the story are mimicking or are being represented. Amazing story, all about post-colonialism and loss of culture and artistic styles and how political times can influence those artistic styles. Really important stuff. Best new comic I think I read all year. The Art of Charlie Chan Hock-Chye by Sunny Liu. Good stuff. Now, my favorite book from the year, and this is the first in a trilogy. Some of my classes, we would read like the first book in a trilogy, which was nice because it could pique our interest in something we might want to now read when we have time over the summer, or something we might want to pursue further. At other times, it was a little frustrating because it was like, oh no, I wish we had time to read the next few books in that series, but instead we had to move on to different units, different readings. But this was the one book that I definitely intend to finish out this trilogy. I didn't mention this in my May TBR, or kind of pseudo summer TBR, but I might try to finish this trilogy this summer. We'll see. But this story really sunk its hooks into me. This is Rebecca Roanhorse's Black Sun, book 1 in her Between Earth and Sky trilogy. Similar to Gods of Jade and Shadow, this is based on Mesoamerican culture, but wildly different from really anything else we read in that class. This is a secondary epic fantasy world, so it's loosely based on those cultures, but there are no direct references to historical region and the actual historical cultures. Roanhorse explains at the end of this book, and in some other essays that she's written, and interviews she's given, she explains that whereas Lord of the Rings and a lot of fantasy is based on kind of European mythology, she really wanted to write something based on pre-Columbian Mesoamerican mythology. And there's even a little based on, in here on like South Pacific Islander, or pre-European colonialism. But yeah, all that, besides all of that, just the story that she's telling here is so interesting, and it's such a refreshing new epic fantasy. This is, I'm not gonna lie, big reason why this is probably number one on my list is because it is the genre, the like epic secondary world fantasy genre that I'm most familiar with and that I'm most recognize that I enjoy anyway. So that does play a big part in why this is number one for me. But it's so unlike anything else I've ever read. That said, I will say there is a little bit of Dune in here. If you kind of like the idea of, not necessarily with the negative connotation, but manipulative mother, kind of forcing her son into a predetermined, super powerful path. There's definitely a lot of that in here. That's one of the characters' entire storylines. There's also a lot with like the government in charge of the capital city, Tova. They're kind of like, they shun magic and magical thinking or any like practical use of magic in this world, and they prefer more kind of like natural sciences, like reason and stuff. And that power structure that's kind of running things for this region, for this area, and especially in the capital city, they're about to fall apart. Like they're not doing well. There's not a lot of faith in their current leader. Part of that's based on kind of racist sentiment between the different leaders or higher ups in that government structure. Yeah, there's also some cool stuff in here, like seafaring voyages. Like, oh, we could cut across this really dangerous path through the sea. No one's ever done it in such a short amount of time, but maybe we can do it. There's some cool adventuring stuff there. Great water mythology stuff, water fantasy things. Don't want to give too much away. There's giant crows, giant insects, different clans that worship different gods. One clan, the Carrion Crow, who still kind of worship their god. Yeah, really, really great book, Black Sun. I'm really excited to see what happens in book 2 and 3. Again, this is the Between Earth and Sky trilogy. So yeah, that's my favorite thing I read in school this last year. Now, my homework for you guys is, I'd love to hear down below in the comments what things you've ever had to read for school. This could be even like a book report you had to do in middle school. But what have you read for school that just really blew your mind, or that you really, really loved? I think a lot of times that setting, while sometimes it can be a little unfortunate and feel like you're being forced to read something when you'd rather spend your time doing something else, I think a lot of times with the right professor or with the right teacher, they can structure the discussion in such a way and the assignments in such a way that makes your enjoyment of a book even greater, and makes you connect with things that maybe you wouldn't have if you just picked up the story on its own. I can definitely say that happened with every one of these books. I'm so grateful to the professors who assigned these and who facilitated those conversations for me to kind of really dig into the themes here and analyze things and just get a lot more out of all 10 of these books. 11 if you count Mouse. I could talk about that forever. What of this list have you read, and have you ever had to read something for school that wound up being super, super rewarding? Again, please, if you haven't already, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if you don't mind sharing this video with friends and family, that could really go a long way in helping the channel grow. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you next week. Bye.